Okay, good morning, everyone, or greetings, everyone. My name is Dr. Tamisha Price Brock, and this is my segment on overcoming performance anxiety and stage fright. And I have several panelists that will be joining me on this particular webinar. It is a pre recorded series, so feel free to go back and watch this as many times as you need to. First up in this particular webinar is Dr. Lamon Lawhorn. He is a professor at North Carolina A&T State University. Dr. Lawhorn, welcome to our webinar.
Thank you for having me. Extremely happy to be here. A little
Indeed.
anxious now that we're talking about anxiety.
Oh, no, no, nothing to be anxious about, of course. Would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, my name is Dr. Lamon Lawhorn, Assistant Director of Bands here at North Carolina A&T State University. I oversee the percussion activities, and I look to instruct students, making sure everybody stays on the top of their best performance. I'm an avid, how do you say it? I'm very passionate about percussion education. I've had the opportunity to teach in quite a few opportunities. I'm also participant in the Percussive Arts Society. I currently serve as secretary for the executive committee and member of the board of directors. I've performed in various avenues, drum set, of course, total percussionist with marimba and timpani and orchestral opportunities with various groups, and just view myself as a well-rounded percussionist.
Great. Speaking about percussion, could you just give us a little bit about your percussion background, how you got started in music, and how long you've been playing, and if you're still gigging today?
Okay, well, I grew up playing drums in church. My background initially was being a drummer at church. I got my first drum set when I was about four. I busted it when I was about four and a half. And ever since then, I had to just run down to the pews to watch the drummer play at age seven. My mother bought a drum set from the church, and when I told all my friends to come to church that Sunday, and I just took off from there.
Oh, wow.
But I attended Prairie View A&M for my undergraduate degree, and it was music education. I marched at the drum line there, was exposed to a high rudimental vocabulary during my time there in performance and showmanship and entertainment. From then, I went to the University of Mississippi and studied with Ricky Burkhead. I received my master's in percussion performance, and I was really looking to that opportunity to return to campus this past summer. But hey, the pandemic ruined some things. But
Yes.
and there, I was exposed to a lot of um, performance. When I reckon just to say exposed to live performance, I remember my first weekend there. The steel band had a performance at like a movie theater that was opening, and I had no steel band experience. And Mr. Burkett just threw me in the fire. He was like, "These are the rhythms we're gonna play," and everything like that. And as far as a percussionist, you know rhythm, so you should feel a little comfortable. But I was a little nervous, and I just tried to play what I heard. And then I was exposed to a lot of jazz. I was studying jazz drum set there. Um, I performed a marimba concerto competition. Well, I performed in the departmental concerto competition, and I won performing a marimba piece. And I performed in the LOU Symphony Orchestra, the Corn Symphony Orchestra, and this was all exposure through Mr. Burkhead. And I completed my master's program there. I moved back to Fort Worth, and I was touring for a year with the brass band on drum set. Um, and enjoyed my time. I actually wrote a piece some years later that somebody asked where did it was inspired from, and it was from some my time in that brass band playing a lot of New Orleans style drumming. And then I got the position at North Carolina Central in 2009. Moved to Durham, North Carolina, and was doing a bit of drumming, marching heavy, but also drum set. They have a really good jazz band program there, and so I was connected with a guy named Thomas Taylor who was doing a lot of drum set play, a lot of really good students. And then in 2011, I entered to the doctorate program at UNCG. I was studying under Christopher Keaton, and he exposed me to quite a bit. He has his mindset of total percussion, and I was doing a lot of again drum set playing, but marimba playing, exposure to a lot of high marimba literature. And I graduated in 2015, and 2014 I got the position here at North Carolina A&T. And so since then I've been here. I'm still gigging as much as possible, but what I've done is I do a bit more in-house, meaning I created my own home studio. I have this thing called morning sheds where when I wake up in the morning, do whatever I got to do, take the kids to the school, brush my teeth, sit down and play drum set. And whatever comes to mind, I play. The reason why I call it morning sheds is because in the gospel realm, when you say sheds, you're talking about just working on ideas, getting them out. And I think a lot of times we see the finished product of people, especially in the social media era now. You want to post the best thing, make sure everything is perfect. Well, for me, it lets people see how I get to do what it is I do. I'll just press record. Some stuff I've practiced, maybe a lot of things I one take. I'll listen to music outside of of me practicing. When I sit down, I play it, and that's it. And so it gives people the opportunity to see my rough edges and let people know that I'm not perfect. I may be a high level performer, but I'm not perfect. So these morning sheds is just a opportunity for people to see how I get my creative ideas out.
Indeed, and you said a lot of great things there. I love what you said about how Professor Burkhead just threw you in the fire with the steel band. That speaks right to our topic, just having that performance anxiety and talking about some of the triggers, that trigger stage fright. You can practice well. It's like singing in the shower. You sing it perfectly, but when it's time to sing that solo in front of people, you clam up. Or, just, you're great, you're a great performer, but some situations just create that stress and anxiety. And some people just don't know how to handle it. You said some great things there. And then I love what you said about like the morning sheds, and sometimes you just put raw material out there, and how we often just focus on the finished product, and we have this idea that we only have to put out what's perfect, and we're not just cookie cutter. We're not just out of the box ready. And I remember going back, to my clarinet a few weeks ago, and I said, I'm going to start posting a couple of days. I've missed some days since then, but I'm going to start reposting. But, I think it's good for even our students to see, hey, this is what it takes. You're a lifelong learner. You have to go back to the basics. I always use the analogy, just like a basketball team. Pro basketball players, they always go back to the basics at every practice: dribbling, passing, and shooting. So we never get away from those things. But very good things, and it speaks right to the heart of what we're talking about today. And the purpose for this webinar, I remember posting a poll on Facebook about a month or two ago, just asking, what are some things that you wish your professors had told you before you graduated that would have made you a more effective teacher? Or what are some things that you wish they would have told you or helped you with that would have prevented you from changing your major? And one of the key things that came up was performance anxiety and stage fright. A couple of students said that when they found out they had to do recitals and they couldn't overcome their fear of being on stage, they opted out of music ed and music performance altogether. So I felt that this was necessary to help provide tools for students and aspiring music educators, aspiring performers to know, hey, how do I overcome this challenge of stage fright? How do I, make it where it doesn't control me and I can still make it through a performance? I remember the artist, what is it, Sia, when she first did a live performance, she was facing away from the audience
Yeah.
because she had like stage fright or some type of anxiety. And it was just interesting to learn about that even professional recording artists still deal with stage fright
Mm-hmm.
and performance anxiety. So thinking back on what you said and thinking about some of the things we're talking about, how do you overcome your anxiety, or how do you deal with anxiety when you feel like you're stressed or anxious, or how do you prepare for that? How do you manage that on stage? And if it happens that you have a mishap on stage, how do you recover from that during the performance?
Well, well, I think this is perfect because as a performance major or getting degrees in performance, you have to perform. There's no option. And I've performed on a big stage, me in a marching band, or with 70,000 in the stands, and I've performed for an audience of one. So there, I've been in different avenues. So I think it's kind of like I have like the tools to be successful, but I'm inquisitive and I ask a million questions. And during my undergrad years, I got some really good information from my undergrad professor, Dr. Selden. And I was asking, how do you get over this stage fright? And she gave me some pointers on things you should do. And she was saying, one, you should practice at different times, like different times of the day. Like you should go in and practice. Say you're getting to play a piece, practice the piece cold. Like go in there, just grab the mallets or grab the without any warm up or whatever, because you never know what's going to happen in an environment where everything may not be going right. You may end up arriving to a situation late, and you may just have to go. Right. And so, and you want to be able to perform as best as possible in these different scenarios. Another thing is to raise your heart rate, because the issue is a lot of times we get nervous and we're on stage and we just, can't control our breathing. We just like hyperventilating. We don't know. So she was like, raise your heart rate. So I would run down the hallway. I would like do push-ups. I would like to do jumping jacks to get the feeling of nervousness or my heart rate. And then I would try to perform the piece and try to like control my breathing to see if I can still maintain the performance aspects while while my heart is beating, while I'm sweating, because that gives off the feeling of anxiety. I would do certain things like that, and then that would definitely help. Also, outside of the craziness stuff like that, I would try to make sure my performance, my practice is as best as possible. And they say practice makes perfect. No, perfect practice makes perfect. So I would try to alleviate any mistakes that I was making, and I would get in my mind that I'm practicing right now. But then I would step back from the instrument and say, okay, I'm going to perform this right now. And so I would try to change my mindset to say, this is a performance. I'm not doing any just practice, trying to hit the notes right. I'm trying to get every aspect of the performance out, either with the body language, with expression, with phrases, to do that as best as possible. That was during my undergraduate years. Now, when I got some really good information from Dr. Keaton during my doctorate program, because he wrote a dissertation on
Wow.
on like anxiety or having stage fright and dealing with some things. And I was in class with some people that used to take what is like B12 beta blockers and stuff. Like, how did you come? Why did I know about this years ago? You know, but I didn't want to take, you know, unnatural substances or whatever it was to do that. But he would talk about people, like when you would get a blank, he would draw, when you draw blanks or being nervous, he was saying you can improv. So if you are playing something and you just have a lapse, you can improv a section or keep repeating it until your mind comes back together. And I always tell students, no one knows the piece except you. Maybe the professor, but the audience doesn't know. So as long as you can keep a poker face or keep your game face on, then just keep repeating the piece or try to do a couple you know, repetitions or do a section or repeat a few notes and then try to jump back on it. The next thing is, a lot of times people are unsure about transitions. So you know letter A, you know letter B. Sometimes it's those few measures in between to getting from A to B that you get caught up a little bit. And so I will always try to practice those transitions so that I would know I'm going from this part and now I'm going to transition easily into the next part. And another thing my professor would always talk about, he was like letters or hand positions. And so, you know, if we're playing marimba and you had a wide, you know, I'm showing my hand, but if you had a wide angle, you know, octave or something like that, and he was like, well, this looks like a W. So if I got lost, I will know, well, let me just make the W and now I'm back in my position. And it was things like that. He would come up with different ideas to just help you get through that situation. Also, have I messed up and had to do a full stop? Yes. And you have to understand, things happen. Is that the worst? No. People may say, oh yeah, you messed up that part, but everything was great. And if you have to stop, you just have to understand, stop, accept it, breathe, get back to it. What you don't want to do is let that one mess up just overtake you and ruin the entire performance. That's one moment in an entire observation of what people are doing of you. You can't let just one little mishap just ruin one piece on an hour recital or anything like that. So mistakes happen, but you want to try to prepare yourself as best as possible to deal with the mistakes. And if it does happen, just live with it. You'll still be great regardless.
Thank you. Wonderful. Just wonderful advice. And I love that, like the mnemonic devices, like remembering the W and things like that. I used to know, even though there was marching band music, you know, if it's like you get lost someplace, think of the bass line, hum the bass line to yourself, hum the percussion part, because you know when the basses play this, I have to play this. So definitely, you know, some really good things to think about. And just some good input, just, you know, and it's okay to have to stop if necessary, you know. And I agree with that philosophy. Sometimes it's better to say, hey, let's stop and regroup before I just continuing down this train wreck, or continue tumbling down the hill. And I think a lot of the times we're not open as professors or advisors with our students, especially in our studios, to say, hey, it is okay, learn how to keep going. We're teaching people to be perfect, but we're not teaching people to recover from mistakes. And I
Right.
think sometimes if we're more conscious about that, then our students are going to feel more comfortable playing for us, instead of them feeling like they're going in front of a firing range every time. They feel like they come into lessons, they get battered down, they're not confident when they go on the stage, and then they feel like, oh, I'm in front of my peers now. But not only that, now you're telling me I'm representing your studio.
Yeah.
So we don't want your studio to look bad, but everyone has a bad day. And it was really interesting what you said about the advice your professor gave you in undergrad about practicing in different environments, practicing different times of day, and then that practicing cold. On one hand, we're always teaching don't discount the warm up. You got to warm up. You got to be warm so you be flexible to avoid injury or to make sure that you can hit all these notes. But sometimes going in and that being the first thing you do, it happens. You may go into an auditorium where it's cold. You may go into somewhere the equipment is not set up right, and now you're just losing it. So I
Mm-hmm.
really like that. Good sound advice. The next question: what advice would you give to someone who fails in their audition, or who freezes up in their audition, not just their college audition, trying to get into our marching bands, our concert bands, or get a music scholarship, but those of us who have completed the degree program and now we're trying to audition for Broadway, we're trying to audition for that band, we're trying to audition for a touring company, and we've been practicing, grueling practicing, we're perfect, and then we go in and the experience itself overtakes us. What do we do?
Um, Again, preparation is key. And I believe again, your practice, your performance is going to only be 80% as well as your practice. So put yourself. It's gonna. Excuse my language. It's gonna suck, but you have to put that stress on you ahead of time. And I teach students, so in drumline practice, I'm as hard on them as I can be because I want them to have this stress already alleviated. So when they get to the performance, oh, it's not as hard. I don't have this feeling of I have to do right because I've already prepared as best as possible. Maybe a day or two ahead of time, go through the full event, even if that means you may be flying into a situation, but walk through where am I going to go. I'm going to put these clothes on. I'm going to prepare like this. I'm going to get up. I'm going to do this. I'm going to take the train. I'm going to get an Uber. I'm going to drive over to where it is. At this time I'm going to play, which is another thing that my professor said. As much as you do going in cold, try to perform around the same time of day that you're going to actually be, try to practice around the same time of day that you're actually going to end up performing, so that your body is kind of understands that at this time. It's kind of like habits. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm an early riser, so if I set my alarm for 5 o'clock for 5 days in a row, pretty soon I'm going to just be waking up at 5 o'clock on my own. What you want to do is try to engulf yourself in as much of the situation prior to, so that you can be as prepared as possible. Try to see, and one thing you don't want to necessarily do is make mistakes habitual, but practice a mistake and figure out how you're going to recover, so that if that situation happens, you're aware of it. Like, I know that a lot of times we're grueling trying to get these things down perfect, 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 and a mistake happened. As a teacher, oftentimes you see those students say, "Oh man, that's an opportunity for you to work on how you can recover." That's the teachable moment, so you can do that. So now that the teacher is now the student again, or going in for those performances and things like that, you have to revert back to some of the same advice you gave those other people on how to do better, and take some of that advice yourself and try to figure out ways to recover. The best advice, as I said, is try to prepare ahead of time and go through the motion as best as possible the day of, or a day before. The day before, or a few days before, and try to get yourself in that environment to say, this is it. And again, switch that mindset into performer mode, so that you can say, this is how I'm going to do it during your practice time.
And I'm sure the same would fall. I know a lot of times, we're addressing what we do as individual performers in our preparation. But I also know, sometimes external factors can cause stress and stage anxiety. For example, when I was in undergrad and did my senior recital, my finale piece, I had made it through all of my pieces after having to put my recital off for months. But got to my final piece, got to the last section of the piece, my accompanist drew a blank
Mm.
and stopped playing for greater than 8 measures, stopped playing. And I'm sitting there in my mind, I'm dying inside, just panicking. I'm still playing. I don't know. I think it was the grace of God. I was still playing. I played that section, had made mistakes all in rehearsal, played that section unaccompanied flawlessly until the end. But needless to say, that level of anxiety that surged through my veins because of the accompanist is something that I don't think we often account for. And I just think, too, maybe some good advice would be for our students to really communicate and have a good rapport with their accompanists, regularly communicate, attend practices, don't miss practices with their accompanists. I know sometimes the studio professor can do all they can, and our students miss their accompanying times or their practice. I think that's so important so that you all have that chemistry and that communication where something as simple as eye contact or body gesture can get the accompanist back on track as well. And then making sure the accompanist is fully prepared, that that they're capable of performing your work. Um, so thank you. Finally, is there anything else you wish to share on this topic or anything you wish to share for the greater good of our students and our current educators and performers?
Say thank you. And here's what I mean by that. I remember performing a piece and doing as best as I could, but they would make mistakes, and I was like, "Oh man, it's horrible, man." And after it was over, one of my professors walked in, was like, "Man, that was great. That was really good. I enjoyed the performance." And I immediately said, "Man, I messed up on this and this and this." And he's like, "Wait a minute, stop. Just say thank you." Because you don't want to diminish the view or the performance that the person just experienced because you're trying to tell them everything wrong. Just say thank you, I appreciate it, and that way you're still the superstar in their eyes. And you're a lot of times we get anxiety over things that nobody else is even aware of. Oh, I missed this note here. Oh, I didn't do that phrasing there. And when somebody comes up to you, you're just so ready to unleash all of the errors that they're no longer enjoying the piece that they just heard. Now they're just hearing the errors that you're telling them, and now they're like, "Oh yeah, you did mess up. Oh, you did mess up. Well, I guess you're not as good as I thought you were." Remain a superstar in their eyes and just say thank you. Mistakes happen. We can prepare as best as possible. The Bible says don't be anxious for anything, but who knows? Things happen, and if they do happen, you'll be a-okay. You'll still remain the best performer on the campus or in the studio or at the university or just the best performer that you can be. Just don't worry about it.
Indeed. Well, thank you, Dr. Lamon Lawhorn, for taking the time out of your schedule to talk with us today and share some helpful tips and strategies for overcoming performance anxiety and stage fright. From our audience, please stay tuned as we have conversations with more guest panelists on this topic. Again, thank you for your time and have a great day.
Have a great day. Thank you.
You're welcome.